To get more analysis on Khumalo's testimony, we are now joined by Unisa politics professor Dirk Kotzé and criminologist Professor Nirmala Gopal. Remember to send us your comments and questions on WhatsApp to 072-110-5584. You can also give us a call on 010-594-6010 or engage with us on X. It's at Newzroom 405. Tell us what you think of today's testimony. Well, a very good evening to you both, Prof and Doc. Thank you so much for staying with us. Perhaps, Prof, let's begin with you with regards to what we've heard today in the testimony. I mean, some parts of it we've already heard in the Madlanga Commission, but certainly what does stand out today is that statement made by the General with regards to that analysis and investigation that they made, finding that a majority of SAPS officers within Gauteng are moonlighting for cartels.
Good evening. Yes, I think that is a very damning observation he made, or presentation that he made to the committee in Parliament. It is something which should be of high concern, very serious concern to first of all, the South African Police Service in general, but also to us as the public, because it continues to contribute to this notion of whether we can trust or not trust the police services, whether it is in a road block where a person is investigated or stopped to see, whether you have a driving license or not, or whether it is when there's serious investigations that must be done by the police. So that is something which I think is an ongoing theme within this investigation and hearings by both the Parliamentary Committee as well as the Madlanga Commission. And it is something which afterwards, I think both will also have to make some recommendations about what has to be done with respect to this.
Doc, I mean, from a criminological perspective, what would you say are the contributing factors that you'd find highly trained police finding themselves moonlighting for cartels? Because the General speaks about the troubles of the PKTT seemingly started when the SAPS members suspected that they were in fact being investigated.
Well, good evening, Katlego, and good evening to your viewers. Of course, I think at the bottom and the root of all of this would be greed. So, at the end of the day, what they are looking for usually is to add to their coffers, to supplement their income. So I would think it's just pure greed.
And do you think that it's common for law enforcement officers to find themselves in such acts and, as the professor is saying, contributing towards that narrative that SAPS members can't be trusted?
Well, definitely. I mean, I don't think, whether police officers commonly join and moonlight in the fashion that we're seeing in South Africa, I don't necessarily think that it is an international phenomenon. But definitely the fact that we're hearing about their moonlighting activities means that the public is going to continue to distrust them. The confidence levels are going to get, going to decrease even further.
Prof, what risks do you think this then poses, not only to other police officers, but to communities as a whole?
Well, I think the main question is, if there's a serious situation in a community, who must you call for protection? Is it the private security services, and many people don't have access to private security, or is the last option still the police services? And I think this is where the real problem for many communities are, is that there's lots of crime and insecurity situations, lack of protection. And the question for South Africans are, who do you use? Who do you call for in order to protect and to investigate also? Because it's not only about protection, it is also how to take it forward. If for example, a crime has been committed, there's a burglary or the serious form of crime, it must be followed up. There must be ultimately consequences and a conclusion for that. It either must go to court or there must be some other forms of conclusion. And if the police cannot do the investigative work so that it can go to the prosecuting authority ultimately, then it becomes a situation where the public will take law into their own hands. And that we have seen many examples of that in the past already. But it is a highly risky and completely unacceptable situation if the public in general starts to become involved in it. So that is why this whole process is so important, because on the one hand it exposes the problems within the police service, but at the same time it also, because it is now presented into the public domain, it also puts pressure on government in general, the police service in more specifically, in order to start with a reform process, because then there won't be any excuses to say, but we didn't know about this.
Yeah.
This is now in the public domain, and therefore the pressure is on both government and the Department of Correctional of Police Services, as well as the South African Police Services in general, in order to make the corrections. And I think this is the value of both processes, both the parliamentary process and the Matlanga Commission, is that it is almost similar to the Zondo Commission or even the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It cannot be hidden anymore. It is now in the public domain.
It certainly is.
And therefore,
Yes, Prof, you
Yes.
can finish your thought.
And therefore, the pressure is on everyone, the official authorities, in order to act. There's no excuse anymore.
It certainly is what you're saying in terms of its magnitude and really what it exposes and the pressure that it's putting on. Doc, I mean, earlier on we heard from the General speaking about that Katie Molefe even knew on the 6th of December, before the operation took place, that the operation would be coming to his house. If we are looking at this, how does organizational culture also just influence some of these behaviors that we are seeing amongst SAPS members? And he also went on to make a comparison that on the very same day, Advocate Johnson, who's the head of IDEC, had sent out an email requesting for some of those dockets, almost painting a picture of how, whether from the top or the very bottom of within the agencies, there seems to be that kind of coordination.
Yes, I think, Katlego, in the first instance, it's this kind of intimidation strategies. If you think about the fact that on the same day, these charges were laid against General Khumalo, but of course, the fact that we had this parallel team that had descended on his property, I think it shows that there's a culture of impunity within the organization. And it's an age-old understanding or theory that police officers usually protect each other, and it's very seldom that you will hear about the deviations, the anti-organizational behaviors, etc., that they display, because unfortunately, you have this very strong sense of solidarity within SAPS, especially, which has, of course, we've inherited the SAPS from the police force, but sadly for South Africa and for South Africans, it still continues. But I think what we're seeing now is that, or perhaps it's more visible now, we're seeing how it has concretized or solidified in a way that we are finding ourselves in the space we are now.
Prof, if we touch on institutional autonomy, how important is it for institutional autonomy to be effective, especially when it comes to policing and intelligence gathering? What policies or structures do you think need to be put in place in order for us to not see some of that meddling that we are currently seeing playing out?
Well, the notion of institutional autonomy when it comes to the police is quite a complex situation, because even if you start with the constitutional status of the police, it is a national function, but it involves the provinces. We know that some of the provinces, like the Western Cape, want to have more police functions delegated or devolved to them. So that in itself is already something which is complicating the matter. For the police to be completely autonomous I think there are very few examples in the world where the police is not under some form of political authority or executive authority. That it is a unit completely on its own, and that it has its own line function authorities and are not linked to the government of the day or to authorities that are elected in nature and executive. So that type of autonomy, I don't think is at the moment in the pipeline. It is more about to what extent is the police service can it functions together with other important functions, like, for example, the different forms of intelligence. It's crime intelligence, but it's national intelligence and other forms. Even in some cases, it will be military intelligence that they will have to use. They have to work together with the prosecuting authority because that is their main, I can say, almost client in inverted commas, for which they are doing the investigations. IDAC is now an example of where the two are actually overlapping. So it is, again, it's not about an autonomous, but rather cooperation system. And so it continues like that, like this. So I think the notion of that the police service will have to enjoy an autonomous status, I don't think that is very realistic in the current circumstances.
All right, not very happening within this current status. That is the Professor Dirk Kotzé saying that. Now we also have a call on the line, Maxwell in Pretoria. Maxwell, a very good evening to you. What are your thoughts this evening?
Good evening to you and your guests, and thanks for taking my calls. And first, I would like to send my sincerely condolences to all the people who have affected by rain, bushback region, Mpumalanga, including Limpopo and KZN. So, well, let's hope the disaster will be gone, because I heard that another level 10 warning has been issued for that part of the world.
Certainly.
So my calling and the point to call to be exactly, I'm very disappointed because we're talking, since we've got two commissions that is involved in the moment with the same matter, and we don't know what the difference is going to take in that regard, as we know that Matlanga Commission is not binding for that fact. So I think they must allow the likes of Bokumalo to continue doing their job, because you can see the sign, what they're doing and what they're continuing to do to fight crime. My biggest disappointment was the issue that was revealed today, that within the SAPS, we still have people who are moonlighting for criminals or for cartel, to use that word. It's so very disappointing. The trust that we have these days with the police, it's a big question mark, because we don't trust that this guy is a really police or he's the other part of the world. It's very disappointing what we are hearing, but we need to see action. We need to see people being arrested at the end of the day, other than to turn all those ad hoc committees to be just a talk show. We need to see action. That's where we'll say we're going somewhere with this. Another disappointment was the DJ Waras murder case, where the judge in Johannesburg, the court, refused the crucial evidence for that murder. So you understand where Mkwanasi comes from, that the judges and other people in the justice system who are colluding with those people that are making crime in this country. Thanks for taking my call.
Thanks for calling us, Maxwell, and giving us your thoughts this evening. Maxwell raises quite a number of points there, Doctor, and especially talking that we need to see action. Prof mentioned earlier on that this is a very important process, both for the Madlanga Commission and the ad hoc committee, in order for us to expose what we are seeing, and most importantly, for pressures to be put in order for change to happen. Do you think South Africans are realistic in what their expectations would be for what these processes would bring at the end? Dr. Gopal?
No, I'm not sure if I think that's a very complex question, really. I think realistic in terms of what the Constitution expects of us, realistic in terms of the legal frameworks, etc. But in reality, I'm not sure, how much of progress we would make in terms of prosecuting those who have been not just suspected, but who have actually performed or perpetrated these digressions, etc. So I think that, so I'm not sure if realistic is the word, but I think it's owed to them. the South African government has an obligation to its citizens. They owe them the right to a just and fair process. I mean, of course, it is, we see this thus far that it is quite a fair process, but I think to have the kind of results that the society is actually expecting,
Yeah.
that's the least the government can do for us.
Most certainly. And Prof, I mean, Maxwell also said that the Madlanga Commission, that process is not binding. Maybe just talk to us with regards to the importance of such a process and what then, even within those expectations that South Africans should have, what would be an outcome?
Well, the Madlanga Commission is the Judicial Commission of Inquiry established by the state president. So they are going to report back to the president. As I understand, they will also distribute obviously the report and make it public to all of us. But so once they have submitted their report, then it is in the hands of the president, and then he must take it further. And I think this is where the real test will be, whether there will be an impact and what the consequences of the Madlanga Commission will be. I think at the same time, in the terms of reference of the Madlanga Commission, they can actually refer some persons, even before they've concluded their process and their report, for investigation and prosecution by the police and the NPA ultimately. I'm not sure that that's going to happen, but I think what we've seen now is that there have been some consequences already. Even before the commission have concluded their work. The way in which the current or the Minister of Police that's on special leave, his status is, I mean, I will be bold by saying I think his political career has come to an end. The same with a very senior General Sabia. What we've heard today in Parliament again with General Kumalo is condemning him in terms of, and there's no way for him to be able to return. And so we can continue with others also. So in that sense, there have been consequences. But and what I've said earlier on also is there's no way in which what we have heard maybe as rumors and so on, and which has now been substantiated by this evidence, can be hidden anymore.
Yeah.
So there's no possibility that the police or the parliament or government can say, but we don't know. We need evidence. We need information. They can't hide behind that. And I think this is maybe one of the big differences between now and then. And as I've said, it is that it has now become public knowledge.
Most
it's
certainly.
not anymore just rumors.
Certainly. Doc, maybe just as we close off, Prof mentioned General Sibia, and within today's testimony, we heard about the Jerry Bushukha case where the team that was appointed by the National Commissioner to investigate this particular case was substituted by a parallel team that was brought in by General Sibia. What does this say about the disregard of the hierarchical structure within SAPS if such instances can occur?
So I think at the very basic level, it tells us that General Sibia seems to be a law unto himself, very entitled, that he could actually go above or beyond what Fani Masemola had actually instituted. And I think it also, in some ways, it also shows us that he seemed like he was untouchable. And it's exactly what his perception of himself has been that has, created the kind of disarray, the disharmony that we're seeing in SAPS at the moment. So definitely, I mean, it was something that he should have been, like one of the politicians, the MPs questioned, is why was he allowed to go ahead with these kind of processes, parallel processes, for example, and the fact that he was not cautioned or disciplined. And I think that's a huge worry for all of us.
It certainly is. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening and giving us your insights. We also still do have some of those WhatsApps from our viewers who have put in their word with regards to what we are seeing today. But thank you there both to Dr. Nirmala Gopal as well as Professor Dirk Kotzé for giving us your insights on this topic this very evening.